Parts of the stream is like the first couple of minutes when it's just a couple of you guys here and we get to chat directly with you. Also, I can say or do whatever I want at this point. I can do stuff like, let me think something good. I could yell, "What time is it?"
Where are you going?
And then I could say, "It's train station time." Because we're back. We are back in the train station.
It's been a long time.
It has been a long time, way too long. And I'm happy that you have joined us here today. We're going to be talking about how to teach your dog good manners. We're going to talk a little bit about identifying, some of the things that your dog's doing that, can be affecting your overall dog training, as well as, how to help them to be right. So
Whoa.
That's some of the stuff that we're going to talk. Oh, you've got quite a poof.
My hair
Quite a
is
poof
like,
going on.
Wow.
I know. It's almost impressive.
Yeah.
It's very poof-tastic. I had to put our pre-show up 2:30, about 2:30 left in our pre-show. We should be probably live on Facebook in just a minute or maybe a little bit less than a minute. So if you are watching us on our YouTube channel, we want to welcome you. I see Shandel and Blake. I've also got a new graphic up here, so let's see if this works. And unfortunately, it covers Kayl's face. But Shandel and Blake says, woo.
That's okay.
And Dan and Ellen Luton.
Oh, wrong hand.
Woot woot. That's right, guys, because you're in the train station.
Hi, Dan and Ellen.
Now, if you guys haven't been to our Instagram channel, it's you should check it out at McCann Dogs. But Dan and Ellen sent us a video of their puppy doing a retrieve from some of the stuff that they learned from one of our YouTube videos, retrieving a ball to your hand. So definitely check them out. I think it's at Lucy.life of Lucy Lou or something. I'm going to get it wrong, but check it out. I've tagged them in our Instagram feed. I see, hi from Kansas City, Missouri, living cheap urban style. Amy says, neat you guys so bad. My 4-month-old Labradoodle is so cute, but he won't come or sit without food. Woot woot. Now, we talked a little bit about fading off the lure, like stopping using food. Amy, if you leave a comment something I'm going to start doing is I'm going to leave these lives up for like 24 hours, and then I want to take them down because I enjoy like all of you guys joining us and like having these great conversations. But I'd like to keep it like a little bit more special of an event. So for those of you who are longtime viewers, let us know in the chat, how many train stations have you been to? And if you're new here, type new in the comments because then we'll have an idea of who's watching. But for you guys that are in the know now, if you join us on one of these train station episodes, I'm going to shorten it so that it's only available on replay for like 24 hours, and then I'm just going to take it down because I love the opportunity to chat with you guys. We have so many amazing viewers and subscribers, followers. If you're on Facebook, you can drop your comments in the chat now as well. We can see them on our setup.
They're making me laugh.
Oh,
you guys are funny.
Oh, I love this. So now it's going too quick. Daryl P032007 can inspire us to have our own train station. I hope it comes with this. It's the most important part. Also gives me an opportunity every time I see that word.
You're going to have to ask Ken to send you one of his dorky t-shirts.
I know. Oh, yeah. I might have a link for that. I actually had train station t-shirts made up. Oh, great. So we have a couple new viewers. We've got Listen to Saga 215, new here. Selena says new. Amy Kwanzi says, I've been watching for about 4 months.
Awesome.
Eden Fraser watching. She's watched 7 to 8. Wow. Amy says, I miss you guys. Well, thanks, Amy. We love having you in the chat. At least we can sort of keep up to date with what's going on. Selena says she's new as well. So now that the pre-show has ended, you guys know what time it is. It's time to get down to business. So today we wanted to talk a little bit and answer your questions a little bit about teaching your dog to have good manners. We're going to talk about how to identify some of the situations you might be having at home. But something that's really cool about today is YouTube has allowed us to do Super Chat for Good. So you may have noticed when you logged in that you can make a Super Chat donation. So in your chat window, there's probably like a little $ sign icon. So any super chats that you guys do, which we haven't talked about super chats in the past.
What is a super chat?
Yeah, so if you donate money, in this case, oftentimes it's to the creator, but today it's all about those Dogs for Diabetics charity that they provide dogs for insulin-dependent diabetics who need them. And for you guys at home, I'm an insulin-dependent diabetic as well, have been my whole life. And going through their charity, looking at their charity, it really inspired me. And I wanted to give you guys the opportunity, if you feel like it, to super chat. So there's a little $ donation at the bottom of the chat window where you can do like $1, like a donation, and all of the donations, your comment will stay highlighted and we'll see it in the chat.
That's cool.
It's really cool, yeah. But we'll see that. I'm actually going to set this up so that I can make sure I don't miss any of those super chats if we get any. All that money will be going to Dogs for Diabetics. So it seems like a really cool charity, and I thought, what a great opportunity to, do some good or try to raise some money for those guys. So that basically sums it up for us. So today we're going to talk to you about teaching your dog to have good manners,
and why it's important that your dog should have good manners.
Absolutely. Both are really, really key things in helping you identify it and what to do about it. On that note, I'm Ken Steep.
I'm Kayl McCann.
Welcome back to McCann Dogs. I think I've gotten out of the rhythm of doing the train station, because I made this great train station bumper. It took me hours and hours to make. And I think I'm going to just share it with you guys now, especially for those of you who are new. I see lots of great comments coming in. For those of you who are new, this is going to be great. For those of you who have watched it before, this may not be as awesome as I think it is. I think we know where we're going with this. But check out our train station bumper.
Which dog is the cutest?
That's the ultimate question, isn't it? I don't know. It's hard to tell.
They're all pretty darn
cute.
cute.
I might say Deegan.
I think I might say funky.
Okay, fair enough.
Or hippie.
So
or slam.
I see lots of you guys in the chat will have lots to gain from this today's conversation. Lots of people talking about, that their dog will only behave when they have food, or, a lot of other challenges that people might be facing. For Selena, how often do we do these? We try to do these once a week, every Thursday at 7 p.m. And we usually miss one Thursday a month because I work as a firefighter as well and I have to work that night. But we'll often do a special live stream like earlier in the week.
Mm-hmm.
So
like on a Tuesday night.
Yeah, on like a Tuesday.
In our agility arena.
Which is really fun.
Mm-hmm.
So if that is, if you enjoyed the live stream tonight, then definitely hit that subscribe button, because we'll have a chance to talk with you again in another train station. So let's start talking about pushy dogs who are pushy. And we see this sometimes when dogs come to training. A lot of times people are coming to training because they have a pushy dog.
Yeah.
Or
sometimes people don't actually know that their dog is pushy.
Right. Yeah, that's important.
And I think that's sort of why we decided to go with this topic, because we have a lot of new classes starting this week at our in-house training school.
Yeah.
And we've just sort of noticed that there's a lot of dogs that very quickly get to 7, 8, 9, 10 months, a year old, and they've missed the boat as far as manners go.
Right.
And then what starts to happen is you have a big, strong, and a little bit more experienced dog that has just poor manners, and then they can become really hard to manage. And we're not talking about mean dogs or anything like that. We're just talking about high energy, happy-go-lucky dogs that are just slightly obnoxious because they're just overzealous and they don't have very good emotional control. And that's something that we want to really work on a lot with our dogs, because A, it makes them more enjoyable to live with, and B, when we have dogs, the reason why we got dogs is so that we could enjoy them in tons of aspects of our life.
Yeah.
And if our dogs didn't have good manners, that would probably mean that we wouldn't be able to incorporate them in many parts of our lives, because, we would be worried about them misbehaving. So I think that it's important to focus on the manners so that you can, take your dog to more places and let them experience more things, but it's impossible to do if they don't know how to listen.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that we do so much work for this channel, that we publish so much to this channel, because we want you to be able to take your dog out and enjoy life with them, to take them out, you know, and have a great recall so that they can have time off leash, so that you can go to busy public places with them walking at your side, you know, experiencing life with your dog, meeting new people. Yeah, totally. Which is, if you're new here, I was actually a student of McCann Professional Dog Trainers. I went there with my black lab Deegan, and I'm going to talk about her in a moment, because she
didn't listen very well.
No, she also had very poor manners. But you know, I went there as a student, and I met Kayl. You know, I took classes. I was there every week. I would go, like, when I wasn't having class, I'd go there and I'd rent one of the halls and I'd train all the time.
He was a traininator.
Yeah, I was a traininator, but I loved it. And I loved, you know, working with Deegan. I loved the experience that she was getting, that I was getting. And eventually they just asked me to be if I wanted to do my apprenticeship as an instructor, because I was there all the time. And I met Kayl. She was the...
we asked you to be an instructor because you went from having a really
Right.
terribly trained dog to a very well-trained dog. And we went, wow, I think this guy has some potential in training dogs. That's why we asked you, not because you were there all the time.
I know. It's funnier if I say that, though. It's just, if they're like, he's always here, so just let's give him a shirt, I guess.
Now we're going to have people just hanging out all the time.
Yeah, I know, trying to become instructors. Yeah. I didn't think of it that way. That's a good point.
That's okay.
But Deegan, that black lab of mine, was a very pushy dog. And some of the little things that I didn't recognize that really set her back and really made it more challenging for me was simple little things, like, when I was rewarding her, she would be really rough about taking the food. Like, she would, you know, the ends of my fingers would be raw at the end of a training session. And all of these things that we're talking about are like tiny little symptoms of a much bigger issue, or, you know, a much bigger goal that you need to accomplish. Because taking each one of these things and fixing them, helping your dog with them, you know, will lead to overall a better dog, a dog who likes to listen, a dog who has a little self-control. And that's really, really important, especially when it comes to, you know, your untrained dog, as you're teaching them more and more.
I think we probably should go over a few more things that dogs do that show to us that they're lacking a little bit of manners. And some of you may already recognize some of these symptoms in your own dog. And sometimes people go, oh gosh, I didn't even know that was like something that, you know, wasn't just cute.
Yeah, great point. And I see some really great questions coming in on the chat from both Facebook and YouTube. So we will get to those in just a second. But let's talk about some of the other ones that, you know, if you have a pushy little dog who's, you know, feels like they have big shoes to fill, you're going to see some of these things from them. So things like barking, if your dog barks at you because they want you to play with them.
Like demand barking.
Yeah, like bark, bark, bark. Okay, I'm ready to play now. Or bark, bark, bark.
You need to get up and do something with me now kind of bark.
Yeah, yeah.
Or I want that kind of bark.
Right, yeah. Those are really, that's really a sign that your dog's being a little bit pushy. The same thing when it's dinner time. If your dog's like, you know what, you're home from work, I'm ready to be fed, bark, 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 or, you know, doing some behavior that's really like insistent that they get fed, it's another really important sign that you need to recognize that your dog's being a little bit too pushy.
Yeah, and I think sometimes we humanize dogs a little bit, and it's a very normal reaction to go, oh, you're hungry? Okay, let me feed you. And then we go get the food out of the, you know, out of the container and then feed the dog. Meanwhile, the dog goes, ha ha ha, I got you trained really well.
Yeah.
All I have to do is bark at you a few times and you'll, you know, do whatever I say. But where we see a dog when they do that, my first instinct would be to tell the dog to be quiet, maybe ask the dog to do, you know, a behavior like sit or lie down and have them do something respectful for a few moments. And then, okay, now I'll get your dinner. So not that I'm going to withhold the food, but I'm going to like say, if you want this, you got to give me something first. This is not just a one-way street.
Yeah, that's really important that you, if you take that moment and, you know, mark that as, hey, knock it off, or hey, you be quiet, or something like that, that interrupts the behavior. Because a lot of time your dog, two things, barking is a self-rewarding behavior. So your dog does it because it feels good. And number two, they're essentially training you. You know, the way that dogs learn is, you know, do multiple repetitions. Well, if your dog has had you come home and then they barked at you a few times and they've learned that every time they start barking, you're ready to get their dinner ready, they're training you. So you need to acknowledge these moments in your, you know, day-to-day things as you work with your dogs and recognize that that's a pushy behavior. So I love Kayl's idea of getting your dog to getting them to do something, work for it, earn it a little bit.
And it doesn't even have to be anything big. It can be something really small. It can be something really easy. But what you want to do is put yourself back in the driver's seat before you're handing out things. Because one of the best ways to teach your dog to have better manners or to be more respectful is to understand that you're the one that gives them things. So in order to get things that they want, they have to be good to you. Otherwise, those things aren't going to be so easy to get. So, we need to control their resources so that it allows us to have a little bit more important presentation in their life. It raises our status as leader. It makes us seem a little bit more appealing. Worth listening to, exactly.
Yeah.
And one of the easiest non-confrontational ways to establish yourself as a leader is to control their resources and teach them that they need to give good behavior in order for you to give them something that they want. It could be food. It could literally be affection.
Yeah.
A common thing that dogs will do is they'll come up and they'll put their paw on your lap, and most people say, "Oh, that's so cute." Right. Or I would push their paw off and say, "Hey, that's a little bit pushy.
Hey, mister.
That was a little bit forward." And then I might make them sit there for a second, and then I might say, "Okay, jump up," and then I might ask them permission, and then I would give them snuggles and kisses. I am not opposed to snuggling and kissing the dogs. Ken will definitely agree to that.
No, Kayl loves to do that.
I could do it all day long.
Yeah.
But I want to make sure that I'm not accidentally reinforcing something that the dog is sort of thinking that they're in charge of the situation. I wonder if we should answer some questions, because we're getting
we see tons of questions coming in, and let's jump into some of these.
Thanks for the birthday shout out, Madison.
Okay, we've got to go back.
Very sweet.
Where are we going to go back to here?
Here.
Okay.
Grade 2 started last night. Daryl. I think you described me. Well, I didn't teach grade 2 last night, so I actually have no idea if that was your case or not. But now you have an idea, and maybe if you are feeling like you have any of these things that we're saying, that you can be aware of it. That's funny, though.
So Dolores says, my dog constantly chews everything in sight. I'm finding things that are being destroyed. Now, this isn't a sign
There's a key phrase in there that gives us all the answers to
right, yeah. This is really important for you new puppy owners. Dolores has asked a really important question, so pay attention to this, because if you are finding that things are destroyed, then you're probably not supervising your puppy enough. That's not the sign of a pushy dog.
You don't want to be finding anything.
Right, yeah, right, exactly. I mean, your puppy wants to chew. Puppies explore the world with their mouths, or even dogs, adult dogs will the dogs are going to do what's rewarding. So if your dog finds that chewing up a stuffed animal or chewing up a shoe or chewing up a pair of socks or whatever the thing is rewarding, and they're not getting the information that that's not allowed, then they're going to do it again. So what you really need to do is catch them in the act, or use your leave it command. Not long ago, we published a video on the channel talking all about the leave it command, and it was a fun one to make with our dogs, and it's a very valuable skill for your dog to have. So when you see you're going to be supervising your dog more closely. You're not going to allow them to have
and this is sort of meant to be funny, but it's sort of meant to be serious. When we say supervising, we literally mean that both of your eyes are looking at the dog.
Right, until you get this problem solved.
Yes, because a lot of people say, "Oh, I was supervising," but then if you ask them a little bit more, they're on their phone or they're watching TV and they're in the same room as the dog, yet they missed the part when the half of the pillow got torn apart. So literally, it's like having a new it's a little toddler. You can't take your eyes off them for a second because they're fast and they get into things quickly. Dogs are exactly the same way. You literally need to watch them very, very closely. And, we can't expect anybody to do that all of the time, because that, everybody has lives that they have to do.
For sure.
So that's why we highly recommend using a crate, so that when you can't supervise your dog, your dog can be somewhere that's safe. They can't be wrecking things, but they're also can't be chewing things that could be harmful to them. They're not learning bad behaviors. It's a great alternative.
Yeah. And if you, a crate is the best solution, but if a crate isn't an option for whatever reason, then something like an X-Pen, a barricade, somewhere that you can keep them, that they can't get into trouble, because again, you need to catch them in the act, and if you can't do that, you need to keep them safe. That wouldn't be
our first recommendation, though. We would recommend using a crate.
Yeah, for sure.
And actually, just before we go off the crate thing, I had a lot of conversations with students this week about having to put their dogs through a bit of a boot camp because of the whole pushiness, blah 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 blah. And the 3 students that I ended up having a really in-depth conversation with the 3 common denominators or common parts between the three of them is that none of them were crating their dogs. Their dogs all had free range of their house. They had free range in the backyard.
Yeah.
And the dogs were doing just the brattiest behaviors. All really nice dogs, but just like wild, young, like party animal type dogs. And they were just being given a lot of freedom. And what happens is when you give your dog a lot of freedom, that it opens up possibilities for the dog to make a lot of mistakes. And so my recommendation for the crate was not only to prevent like chewing and whatnot, but it was also to solidify the fact that, you know, if you go in a crate, I can take the control away from you anytime I want to. I'm in charge of whether you get to free run around the house or free run around the backyard. I can give that to you and I can take that away from you just as quickly. So crate training is not just about stopping house training issues or chewing issues. They do those things very well.
Yeah.
But it's also about establishing dominance and leadership, again, in a non-confrontational way. Because when we introduce the crate, we have all kinds of videos and links for crate training specifically, but we do it in a super, super positive way. We actually have our dogs to this off camera right now, and there's one of the crates has the door open, and one of our oldest dog right now, she's literally like sleeping in the big bed in the crate with
we've built a lot of value
free
there.
will. Yeah, we train them to love it. So if you do the same, it's literally going to change your life with your dog for the better.
Here's something that dog trainers know, and this is when you hear it, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, that totally makes sense. But your dog is always learning, whether you're there to give them information or not. So you need to keep that in mind, and putting them in their crate so that they can be safe, they have a comfortable place to relax, whatever, is so important, because otherwise they're out there, making choices. And if it's a bad choice and you're not there to let them know that they're not allowed to chew the electrical wire or whatever, then they're going to think that's the right thing. So dogs are always learning, whether you're there to give them good information or not. So let's jump into the next question. I've lost it now. I'm going to have to go up.
1 year.
Oh, we've got so many things. All these 1-year Labradoodle started a control jump up command, and now he's being a little bit sneaky about his jump up. So I'm impressed.
Sneaky.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to page 2 and see if I can find that comment.
You answer.
So Eden, I am impressed that you've taught your dog to jump up on command. It's so nice to give your dog, for your dog to understand that jumping up on command is one thing and then remaining off on command is another. But something you'll have learned through the process of teaching your dog to jump up is what they do just before they jump. So your dog's going to give you some signs. And again, whether it is standing stock still, maybe they're jumping on the counter and they start to air scent and they're like, oh, there's something up there. Or they are, standing in front of a person, maybe it's you or a family member, and they start that bow. That's the moment you want to give them that off command. And by being that little bit proactive, you can, completely interrupt the behavior. And when you get that off, you can start to praise them. So it sounds like your dog, Ollie, is listening well, especially if he's doing tricks like jumping up and things like that. I think if you are a little bit more proactive about anticipating, even if he's being sneaky, there's going to be some signs about anticipating those jumps and interrupting them. I think you're going to be successful. So let's talk to Brent from our Facebook audience. Any tips for controlling a dog with high prey drive when my 9-month-old mixed breed is around smaller dogs and they start to want to run away from him? And I can't see the end of the comment. But absolutely, you need to make sure that before you put your dog in that situation, that you have a great response to name, that you have a great recall, and that you've worked on your leave it. And it's going to sound like
you don't want to be putting a dog with high prey drive that's untrained in that scenario without having a leash as well.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It's really, really important. You're always going to have your dog on a long line if you're out in a space where he can make a mistake. Work on your come command. It's not whether your dog has high prey. Yeah, you leave it. Whether your dog has high prey drive or whatever the drive is. All our border collies, have incredible prey drive, and they love to herd sheep. They love to herd squealing cars, squealing little kids, all these things. But when you recognize that there's going to be an issue, you can give them an incompatible behavior. Maybe that's coming to you and sit or whatever. Maybe it's walking on a loose leash, whatever your thing is.
Yeah.
But having good control is vitally important for both your dog and whoever the dog is that has seemed like prey to him. So really make sure that you don't put your dog in a situation where he can make a big mistake. So keep that in mind. Okay, so we've got lots of good questions here. Shandlin Blake says demand barking is the worst. Yeah, I totally agree. It's really frustrating. I saw one that oh yeah, Amy mentioned my dog barks when we watch TV, and that's not necessarily a sign of a dog being pushy, because I know our border collies, when Kayl's watching, Kayl will often watch her runs, her agility runs on her phone, and then we'll cast it up on the Apple TV, and like there's actually a really popular video where a border collie's watching himself on
and bouncing.
Period challenge or
really
whatever,
funny,
bouncing and looking really cute. And our dogs get really stimulated when they hear Kayl, running the agility course, and they do the same thing. Not necessarily a sign of your dog being
it's
pushy.
More like a stimulation or like excitement. You want to be able to discourage it, as if you can, but it's not. It doesn't always mean that they're being naughty.
And interrupt it, stop it. Like, hey, knock that off if your dog is being pushy or whatever. And then the moment, because again, it's sort of like a cycle that their brain gets into this point where they're like, oh, I need to make noise. And this is really gratifying when I make noise. So if you interrupt it with your voice, interrupt it with a little redirection. You can say their name and tap on the side, get them some attention on you. Just break their focus for a minute can often just break them out of that cycle.
Yeah, basically with any unwanted behavior, there's two ways you can go around about it. There's prevention and then there's correction. And we can certainly talk about different types of corrections, but they that has everything to do with, what's the dog doing? What is the dog like? So that's sort of a hard thing to talk over live stream because it's such a specific thing. But prevention is a really easy thing to get into as far as, any dog goes, because especially we've mentioned before, barking, digging, jumping, anything like that are all what we deem self-rewarding behaviors. And unfortunately, those are the ones that are the most challenging to fix, because you don't need to be, petting your dog or giving your dog cookies or anything like that when they're doing those behaviors. Your dog will do them repetitively because it's internally enjoying. It's enjoying to do that type of behavior. Yeah. So dogs, they're very simple creatures in some manners in regards to they literally repeat what feels good or what's positive to them. They repeat it, repeat it, repeat it. And because we know that, that's how we can train them. So if we want them to do something that we want, then we need to reinforce them over and over and over for that particular thing. But it also can work against us. Earlier, Ken said dogs are always learning. So if your dog is repeating a behavior that they find self-rewarding, it's very, very difficult to fix. So one of the most important things to do is that you must prevent that behavior from continuing to happen over and over and over again. So you need to think about stopping them from being in that scenario. Or a great thing to do is to teach them an alternative behavior instead. So a really simple example would be maybe your dog jumps up on people when they're really excited, or maybe they jump up on you or whoever else. Yeah. So in our classes, we teach an exercise called sit and accept praise. So we do not want to deter the dogs from being excited to see people and greet people. We think that that's a lovely trait, but we don't want them doing it in an obnoxious manner and like jumping up and bopping people in the noses or, scratching or whatever it might be. So we teach the dogs that if they want to be said hello to, they want to be greeted, they need to be holding a sit. And so we reinforce the dog for sitting on a completely loose leash so that they're using their own self-control to stay there. And then we either reward our dogs ourselves, or if the dog's able to sit on a loose leash, we'll then allow the person to come in and do the greeting. And if the dog isn't able to keep enough brain power to maintain the sit, then we stop the greeting and we go back to working the sit so that the dog only gets positively reinforced for doing the correct behavior. So that's a sort of a simple way to give you an example of taking an unwanted behavior and replacing it with something that is going to be a good alternate instead. And the answer I just gave you is something that we will replicate for many different issues, but I thought that's sort of like an easy one for you to kind of understand it.
All this knowledge in this dog
right
training
in this
brain.
Large,
absolutely. So you get here at the train station.
Messy bun.
Maybe that's why, because there's so much knowledge poofing out of your puff. I need a puff.
You do need a puff.
Let's
have a hair growing contest.
I don't think that's going to work.
I feel like I'm already way ahead.
When we met, I had a shaved head, and I wish I could. I kind of want to go back to that. It's so much easier.
But after we get married.
yeah, exactly.
Actually, I don't care. You can shave your head.
I see. Lots of good stuff coming in here. I'd like to move on to the next section. Brian Seiko asks, why do dogs do that? And I missed what the context was, Brian, so you might have to ask me again.
Quiet.
This is a good question. We get it Often. So
Oh, that's a good question.
Selena asks, when is a good age to stop crate training, or does it just depend on the dog? So we crate train our dogs from the first day that they come home. We use a crate excuse me, with our dogs throughout their entire lives. Now, if you're in a situation where you'd really like to stop using the crate, you need to ask yourself a couple of questions. I would start by giving your dog a little bit more freedom for a very short period of time and see what kind of choices that they're making. And if you get to a point where you can't remember the last time they made a bad choice, then you're likely ready to move on from having to crate your dog every time that you go away. Now, with that said, I am such a wholehearted believer in using a crate, or at least having the crate available to the dog, because it's like a bedroom. You know, if you train it right and if you build value for them being in there, then they can go and hang out in there, and they will choose to.
We use it for other reasons too. So like our dogs are crated in both of our vehicles for safety. Our dogs, we had a dog that just had an upset stomach for a couple days,
Right.
and he wasn't crated, and then he messed on the floor overnight. And so for the next couple days, until we were able to make him feel better, we crated him so that he couldn't go to the bathroom on the floor, which was nice for us, and it's also nice for him too, because he was mortified that he did that.
Right.
So there's lots of reasons. Like, you know, do I trust our dogs in our house when we leave? Most of them, absolutely, of course. But we like to keep the crate as an option because it's just a nice alternative thing to use if we need to. And some of our younger dogs are still crated when we leave because they're young, and you know, I just feel at more of a peace of mind when we're away. And we have other dogs that are only crated if we absolutely have to for some reason, but they are so comfortable in it that if we need to use it for whatever reason, you know, they aren't stressed or anxious about it or upset about it, and neither are we.
Yeah. That's good. It's important. I just looking at a couple of these comments that I wanted to chat about for a second. Neoma's channel, welcome to the train station. Neoma's channel, who's an often a viewer here at the train station.
Nice.
She's asking a question about her dog offering behaviors, is what it sounds like. What other things would you try for a dog who guesses and gives behaviors without listening? For some reason, it only happens with certain behaviors. Where does this continue on? So certain behaviors.
Cover nose, grab tail, roll over.
Yeah,
and
so
are always
it's almost like a trick training question. And Funky will do something similar to this. This isn't a sign of your dog being pushy, because it requires some effort from your dog.
It actually shows a lot of creativeness and willingness to please.
Yeah, for sure. So again, this is not really on the topic of your dog being pushy, but you need to isolate the behaviors and make sure that you get your rewards. So if your dog's offering like multiple tricks at a time, you need to mark the one that you want, or mark one that you're happy with, and to sort of break that cycle. I love the story about teaching Funky how. Was it the down roll over? You taught her 3 tricks in a row, and it sounds like for Neoma's channel, because she sounds like she's training lots and doing lots of tricks. Just talk about that for a second.
Yeah, well, when she was a baby puppy, like, I don't know, she might have been like 9 weeks, like she was really little. I was teaching, you know, sit down, shake a paw, roll over, and I didn't realize that. But when I was teaching it to her, I accidentally was practicing those 4 behaviors in the same sequence over and over and over again, instead of like mixing them up. And so she was doing so well with them. So I like took her to my parents to say, like, look how smart my 9-week-old puppy is. She can do all these crazy things. And I had some treats, and I asked her to sit, and then she sat, she lied down, she popped up, she put her paw in the air, and then she rolled over and then looked at me, and I went, oh my God. I didn't even realize that, like, in however many minutes I had been working on it, I had strung those 4 behaviors together. And Fun literally thought that when I asked her to sit, she was supposed to do all of those behaviors, because I was yesing and feeding only after the rollover, after the 4th behavior. So it was funny, but it was also a good reminder to me that I need to be a little bit more specific when I'm reinforcing her, so that I quickly fixed it. I just went back and did them all individually, but it was pretty funny, and it was just a good little
it's such a classic
wake-up call.
It's a classic Funky thing.
It is
something
a classic funky thing.
I see Mary VW asks, P.S. demand barking, I'm asking for a friend. We did talk about that a little bit ago. I know that I saw that you had mentioned it, and that's why we talked about it. But we did talk about that a few minutes ago, and you can actually scroll back back if you want to check it out. Let's go to Brent Rosso from Facebook says, yes, he is on a long lead, but struggles with his leave it and come commands. These are things you absolutely must work on with him. We have a video on the channel about leave it that is really going to help you out a bunch. And we have a couple of
easy drills, easy exercises to follow.
For sure. And we've got a couple of come command videos on the channel. And on Monday at 7 p.m., there's a new one. This is your...
Isn't it weird that you're wearing a cop hat when you're a firefighter?
No, I don't know. Is it? I don't know. I feel like I wear many hats as a dog trainer. Wow, that's much wittier and more intelligent than I intended it to be.
I've never worn a cop hat before.
It's not that comfortable. However, we're teaching a new video coming out on Monday that's going to be helpful for you, Brent. So make sure you check that out.
It doesn't fit on my head because of my top knot.
Angela asks, guy, and for those of you who are really looking for the teaching your dog to have good manners, we have another whole section about like outside environment good manners, so hold tight for that. But we love hearing from you guys in the audience and from our subscribers. So Angela mentions, how do you handle two dogs that don't get along very well? Well, number one, 100% you're going to separate them. You don't want to put your dogs in a situation where they can make some of these bad choices. And again, I can't give you great information through a YouTube video
without knowing the backstory a bit more.
There's so much information that we need to know, but my suggestion for you is research a local trainer, find a good behaviorist, someone who has experience with the breed and maybe a similar situation, but do thorough research. Make sure that they are on the same wavelength you are in terms of their methodologies, and then see what you can do. But I don't feel comfortable giving you...
if you're local, you can call our school. We have a fabulous behaviorist on staff that deals with these types of issues on a daily basis.
For sure.
But I don't know where you live to see if that's convenient.
I know, it makes it harder. I see Shandlin Blake, who's often in the train station live streams. Let's see this for a sec. I send it over. She said, how about different expectations in different places? This is a good one. Yeah. Example, my dog's allowed to play be naughty at agility, can jump up and return the toy, and pulls on leash. And I can't get the rest of that comment. It was a long one. So what about different expectations in different places? Oh, but not in a day-to-day. Yeah. So what about different expectations in different places?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because dogs are super situational animals and learners. And so they absolutely can learn how to, do something in one location and scenario and then understand not to do it in another. It's the same reason why some dogs listen to some people in your house better than others. I have really, really well-trained dogs, but I couldn't guarantee if I handed my leash over to somebody they didn't know, or like a child, or somebody that they may view as like more of a litter mate, that they're a dog, they might take full advantage of that moment, even though if I had them, they might they would listen a lot better. So they are capable of learning things in different scenarios. The most important thing is that you're consistent. So if you're okay with, I let my dogs jump up on me with a toy and be a little crazier in agility as well, because I'm looking for drive and zest and all of those types of things. But at the end of the day, even in agility, if I say stop, drop, and roll, the dog is going to do that because I'm the top dog in that moment. I'm just allowing them to have their head a little bit more in that scenario. But if we go home and we go for a walk on our street and I pass by somebody or there's a distraction, I fully expect that those silly behaviors that I allow in that other moment, I can control them with my voice or whatever. So they definitely can learn to be able to adapt from location to location. However, I'm going to contradict myself a little bit right now. I would allow my dog to have those types of changes in my expectation once I've really established my initial control. So if you are, and I'm not saying you are, but this is generally speaking for everybody who's listening, if you are having any control issues with your dogs, that they do tend to be pushy sometimes, then I would not open up the reins with that dog in different scenarios as of yet. I would try to paint a really consistent picture in all locations and all scenarios that you're in, just to make sure that the dog really understands, who they have to listen to and how to be respectful. And then once you've established that control, what's nice is that you then have the opportunity to loosen the reins a little bit. I am absolutely not as strict with some of my older dogs than I am with some of my younger dogs, because I fully trust the older ones. They listen well. I let them be a little bit silly sometimes. I mean, Funky's 12. She's retired, and I'm not nearly as strict with her as I was when she was, a year old, because she's earned that by being a good listener. So I not that I'm saying that you should just let them do whatever, but I think that needs to be earned through good manners. So that was a long answer. Sorry.
No, that was really good, though. I think it was important for everyone to hear, like big picture stuff.
Also, see you on the weekend.
Yeah.
Chandelin's coming to camp this weekend.
Oh, is she? Yeah, Kayl's got a big agility camp. There's people coming from all over North America to our mechanic.
And all over Canada, too.
Yeah, in Canada.
There's people flying
that
in
is
from
North America.
Well, yeah, I know. Yeah, I know. For some reason, when you said North America, I automatically thought the States.
Yeah.
But there's lots of people coming from the States. And
we're the far North America.
Yeah. They're coming from Edmonton. And Beeline's brother's coming.
Oh, that's fun.
I'm so excited because he was my favorite puppy in the litter, which doesn't make any sense since I didn't keep him. And I kept Beeline. Beeline's not my favorite, obviously.
Oh, that's so cool.
But yeah, Seven's coming. I'm so excited.
Yeah, that's very exciting.
His name's Rap now.
I see that Living Cheap Urban Style says, I can't keep my Doberman in a lay down. She keeps getting up within 5 minutes. And the suggestion I'm going to make for you is baby steps. Get your Doberman to remain in that down and then allow them up after a minute and then try a minute and a half.
And consider where are you standing in relationship to the dog? Right. Are you like a foot away? Are you 10 feet away? We suggest that you start really close to the dog and work duration and then work distance. You want to make sure you work duration first before you're adding distance to any behavior, because if you don't have duration and you go to add distance and you're at a far distance from the dog, now you can't really control if the dog makes any errors. So work in closer and work duration, and then add, we call them the 3Ds.
Yeah. Duration,
distraction, and then what was the third one you said? Distance.
Yeah. Right. Yeah, I know. When you get out of rhythm, you're like,
I just said them in a different order than I normally do.
No, that's really good advice, I think, for her. Now, Brent mentions, and I wish I could see more of this comment, Brent, but it says, we've done basic obedience class here in Chicago and want to continue our training with the My Dog Can program.
Nice.
Would you recommend starting at the first? And I can't see what the rest is here on our preview, and I apologize for that. But Your My no, he's a Facebook coming from our Facebook live stream. But check out our My Dog Camp program. It's in the description below the live video. If you want to train with us, if you want to continue your training, we have a huge support system there. We have our professional dog trainers in the office that can answer the phones, answer emails, review your videos, all those things. And then you can
very interactive.
And chat with us about your dog training. So if all of your family dog obedience skills, like your come command, like your leave it, like your sit and stay, all of those things are in that program.
And we would recommend starting at the first portion, if that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
And if your dog already
level.
Possesses any of those things, you may find that you just go through some of like the first portion of the program maybe a little bit more quickly. But it's always good to start from the beginning, just because maybe you're not familiar with all of the methods and stuff that we do, and that might fill in some gaps or to help you sort of blend things together a little bit more. So it's always good to start at the beginning.
The reality is anytime you're dog training, your dog trainer is teaching you how to be a good dog trainer. That's our focus. We want our students to be good dog trainers. So going back to the beginning, so many people think, oh, well, my dog can sit and stay. And then they get in class and the dog will not sit or stay. And they're not really sure because the dog naturally had a good sit or something like that. But if you start, you start at the beginning of the program, it really gets you better with your timing, with your understanding of the behavior, with your understanding what to do if it goes wrong. So definitely start at the first level. That's going to be helpful. Okay, you ready to go to the environment stuff? Okay, so talking about teaching your dog to have good manners, and to start, we talked a little bit about stuff in the house. How your dog can be good around people, how your dog can behave well. Oh, I see we have a super chat.
There's like a little alien.
Yeah, it sounds
running.
Very cool. Thanks, AZ. We really appreciate the super chat for Dogs for Diabetics, and I know that as a charity, they'll really appreciate that as well. It's very, very cool. Thank you for doing that. So talking about the environmental issues that we are dealing with, things like allowing dogs to greet on leash. It's a bad idea. I don't know how many times I've seen a situation or we've been somewhere with our dogs and somebody's like...
Or going somewhere and having your dog off leash when you're not supposed to as well.
Right. That's an absolutely important...
Yeah, but the on leash thing that's a dangerous game.
For sure.
It's a dangerous game.
Yeah, and not only is it bad for manners, but it puts the dogs in a really bad situation. Imagine, because they feel like they're restrained, so they can't flee the situation. If they get uncomfortable, they feel like they've got to remain there, and that really isn't fair for them.
And a lot of time too, if you're letting your dog greet on leash, most often when you see that happening, the dogs are pulling towards each other. And so there's two things that are not so good about that. Number one, hopefully your goal is that your dog is able to move with you on a loose leash without pulling. And if they drag you towards another dog and then they get the reward of getting to play with them, well, that doesn't really teach them to have very good leash respect with you or to walk on a nice loose leash. And then the other thing is kind of just sad, when they're pulling and leaning into the leash, it often makes their appearance look a little bit more stiff and a little bit more dominant. And maybe the dog that they're approaching may read the dog differently than if they were like approaching in a more a relaxed look or a relaxed state, and sometimes that can set off bad vibes. A lot of the time when you hear about dog fights, most of the time it's dogs that are on leash and not off leash. And not that we think you should just let your dog off leash, we'll talk about it in a second. But on leash greeting is not really a great idea.
Right. Dogs are experts of body language. And when your dog's on a collar, or even especially when your dog's on a harness, it changes that body position. And some of the indications that your dog might give for, feeling threatened or that they want to, be the aggressor here was that chest out, that the hackles up, maybe they appear stiff. All of those things are replicated when your dog's on a tight leash. So it's hard for dogs to understand that, the other dog's well-meaning, they're just pulling to try to come for a visit. So at 100% of the time, I would never allow our dogs to greet one another on leash. And that's actually something we work a lot on in our grade 1 classes, like having your dog sit in at your side while someone comes up to greet you, or, while other people move around. Or somebody walks by you
with their dog, and the dogs have to stay like with their own handler and not bug one another.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really, really important. A lot of dogs. So let's talk about like those off-leash scenarios. So I think Brent had mentioned earlier, brought up a good point about working on his. He mentioned he does have his dog on a long line, but he's got high prey drive and doesn't respond to the come command or the leave it command. So I would never allow that dog to be off leash. I would never put them in a situation where they can make a mistake.
You're setting yourself up to be ignored.
Right, exactly. And them to get into a dangerous situation, whether it's for another dog or themselves. So before you decide to, even in an off-leash environment, like I hate dog parks. We get so many poor people in who have had this terrible experience at a dog park that they have to come in for either their dog was the aggressor at the dog park or their dog was the victim at the dog park.
Attacked or...
Yeah, it's just there's too much going on and there's too many. It's a dangerous situation. But I would, even in a safe environment, I wouldn't let my dog off leash, even if they
and
if
especially
they don't have a great
if
recall.
you don't have really, really good control. Like I've been hiking before with my dogs off leash, and it's important that when you have your dogs out that your dog has good manners, but then you have good manners as well. My dogs have a routine. If we're out on a hike, and usually if we're going to take all the dogs, Ken and I go together so that there's 2 people and X amount of dogs.
There's 4 eyes. And
there's quite a few dogs.
Yeah.
Anyway, so if we see somebody, we call everybody in and we either have them sit or lie down. And if any of them aren't completely trustworthy, so if our youngest or whatever, we will attach the leash and we'll just keep them sitting on a nice loose leash or have them lie down and wait.
Right.
We'll let those people pass by and then we'll say, okay, guys, and then we'll let them get off and move again. But we don't just let our dogs surround whoever's coming or say, hey, heads up, you're about to be bombarded with 7 dogs.
Yeah, that's bad people manners.
No, it tried to be manners, but I expect people to do the same back to me if I have dogs out, but that doesn't always happen. Sometimes it's people that have poor manners, they don't have control over the dog.
Right.
And they just let their dogs run up, and now I'm trying to control my dog, but this other dog's like jumping all over, and it just puts my dog in such a terrible situation.
Yeah.
And it's just not something that you want to do. So it's important that you expect your dog has manners, but then you're also having good manners when you have your dogs on leash or off leash around other people, especially if there's other dogs involved, because it just makes the whole situation pleasant for all parties.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just want to remind you guys really quickly, today's live stream is all the Super Chat donations go to Dogs for Diabetics. So if you want to make a Super Chat donation, it goes directly to them. I see AZ has given us $1 donation for Dogs for Diabetics, and we thank you for that. So I want to circle back for a moment. I see Daryl PO32007 mentioned this, and this is important. We don't greet on leash for those reasons you said. What bothers me is how some owners react to us. I suppose I shouldn't worry about them.
And you suppose right.
Yeah, that's really important, and it may seem awkward. It might feel a little awkward sometimes.
You feel a little bit rude or whatever, but I don't know. The way that I look at it is that my dogs are like my first priority, and I like my dogs more than I like most people in this world. I like a lot of people.
Well, and you have to protect them.
Really special.
Yeah.
So I don't want to, risk a situation happening to my dog just so that I don't appear to be rude. So sometimes I'll just say like, hey, no thanks. I'm just out for a walk with my dogs. Have a good one, and I'll just sort of keep walking.
Yeah.
I've
even said my dog's not friendly.
Which is not true.
It's not true at all. But I don't want to put my dogs in that situation.
Yeah.
And to be honest,
have said the same
understanding dogs, I don't want to put their dog in that situation either. They just don't know yet how damaging it can be. It's just
it can be hard and uncomfortable sometimes, but it's what you should do, and just try not to worry about it because it is the right thing to do.
Right, absolutely. I made a note earlier that says when a dog owner says my dog is friendly and he just wants to say hi, that's a recipe for disaster. Maybe that dog is friendly, and if you know that person well enough, then maybe you can, maybe it's a neighbor or whatever, you could go to like a common area where you guys can both watch the dogs and they can have a social time. But it's the random people that you meet on the street. Just don't let yourself get into the situation because it's not good for training. It's dangerous for the dogs. It's just all around bad. And I wish people would. So talking about. Chandlin Blake made a great comment.
Good excuses, Daryl. You'll like this one if you haven't
Daryl
read
will
it.
enjoy this. Chandlin said, "Oh yeah, you can say hello. I think she's non-contagious now." I think that's a pretty good approach.
That's terrible, but also hysterical.
Yeah, I'm going to start using that one. You could even say, "I think I'm non-contagious now." That might even be more limiting to the people.
That's funny.
So when we're talking about allowing your dog off leash, if you're, to maintain being the dog owner who has good manners, you're only going to allow your dog off leash when you have a 100% reliable recall. If you get to an open space, for example, if your dog loves to chase things, that prey drive dog that I think Brent had mentioned earlier, a bicyclist is probably going to get chased by his dog. If your dog is, a sight hound, if they see like another little dog running around or maybe a kid, they're probably going to want to go investigate those things. So scope out the area where you are, even if it's relatively safe. Get an idea of who's there before you allow your dog off leash. And you can even work some of those great skills in that environment with your dog on a long line to make sure that your dog's responding to your leave it's, to your come command. But to be, to have good manners as a dog owner, you have to set your dog up to be right. And you don't want to force your dog on other people. There's been a couple of situations where we were out for a walk and somebody didn't have control of their dog and their dog came running over and we had all our dogs lie down. And it's really uncomfortable because our dogs are behaving so well, lying down, listening, and their dog just wants to jump all over them. And
it's scary for our dogs.
And then we've got to take control over their dog so that nobody gets hurt and it doesn't start any issues. I see Brent has jumped over to YouTube. You're gonna like it here better anyway, Brent. I'm glad you made the jump, and make sure you hit that subscribe button while you're here. What else? What other notes did I make here?
We've accidentally hit most of them. Just in how we were.
Well, not accidentally, quite on purpose for you guys.
Allowing dogs off leash. About some people not liking dogs or being afraid of dogs. That's pretty common.
Yeah, that is pretty common. If you're in a more urban area and
not everybody wants to see your dog.
No, right, exactly. As much as I can't believe that, how would anyone not want to see Rad or Deegan or Mac or one of those dogs? I've met some people that are really afraid of dogs.
Yeah.
So to be a good dog owner who has good dog manners, make sure you have control of your dog in those busy areas.
Yeah.
Make sure you have that nice sit at your side.
I love dogs for sure. Obviously, if I didn't love dogs, I wouldn't be doing this profession. But I do not like petting obnoxious dogs. So if your dog is jumping and like lunging and obnoxious, I have no interest in petting that dog whatsoever.
Right. Yeah.
I want to pet a dog that has manners, especially if I was walking with a young kid or whatever. I wouldn't want to be dealing and having to be around a dog that was like obnoxious. So, you've got to take the time to do some training, which is not easy. It takes work for sure. But once you have that, then all of those situations will be so much easier because you'll have better control over your dog. And more people will want to say hi to them because they listen well and they look really easy to approach and to pet and that type of thing.
For sure. I think a lot of the things that we've talked about tonight all come down to being proactive.
Yeah.
Knowing your dog's limitations, being proactive if they are going to jump up on people, training that, but identifying that it might happen, really knowing what your dog is capable of, knowing in a busy environment that they can't be have their leash dragging, that they need to be on leash or that they need to be on a long line so that you can work through it is so vitally important. And when we talk about dog manners, we need to know that the onus is on us to give our dog the information to have good manners, because a lot of dogs just will naturally, take food rough, or they'll naturally jump up.
They don't know any better.
They don't know any better. No, and they'll do what's rewarding, as we talked about earlier. So, they'll jump up, they'll do these, they'll come rushing into another dog because they do want to say hello, but we need to make sure that we don't, allow them to get into those situations as much as we can. Okay, this is a good question, and we'll talk about this. So Brent says, we live in downtown Chicago. My dog's great in my apartment. As soon as we go outside, it's distraction city, and he's instantly overstimulated. Any tips for gradually increasing the distractions in a super urban environment? Absolutely.
That's a really good question.
So Brent, we published a video maybe a year ago about introducing our puppy to a really stimulating environment. We went down to the lakefront. And what's really important is that you do so slowly, that you try to find, like, even if you have to go out to suburbia a little bit, you need to find how you can gradually introduce your dog to some of these challenges. And I would do it at a time when your dog's hungry so that they're going to take food. Now, if you get into a situation where your dog's like so stimulated that they're not taking food, then you can start using your voice and, redirecting them, taking them in a different direction so that what's important is that you slowly get them comfortable with these situations, whether it's a, whatever the busy environment is. Maybe it's downtown. We were in New York City not that long ago. Yeah. We saw some really great, well-behaved dogs that were like downtown. And we know that your dog's in a great position to, get lots of socialization from people, places, and things. Socialization isn't just about dogs.
Yeah, and I think it's important that when you are starting to increase the distraction slowly, that the exercises or the behaviors that you're asking of your dog aren't really hard to achieve.
Right.
So like walking on leash, that's one of the most difficult things to do with a dog. So you might have better luck going to a place that's somewhat distracting, but not overly overwhelming, and work on some stationary exercises like holding a sit on a loose leash, or responding to their name, or doing a look at me, or doing sits and downs, or something that requires the dog to be have a more calm, thoughtful mind, because it's easier to achieve those types of things and then progress to things where the dog might be a bit more active when they're doing their behaviors, like recalls, walking, leash respect, things like that, because those are a little bit more challenging. That might also help when you're trying to bridge the gap between no distractions and like a ton of distractions.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I think Brent had mentioned earlier that he was going to check out the My Dog Can program. You can actually, if you go to the My Dog Can program from the link in the description, you can go and try out the first lesson for free. But we talk a lot about the stationary exercises versus the exercises with motion. And those will be really helpful. And those are some of the things we worked on with B. Those are some of the things that we would, have her sit in at our side as we were down by the lake or as we were crossing a street, because we don't live where there's cars driving by all the time. So we had to go to a place where we could introduce her to some of those things. And it's challenging. Yeah.
And we also, when I went to that busy environment, I switched up the training equipment that I was using. So I really love to use a product called the Gentle Leader. And it's a style of head halter for a dog, not the halter. Gentle Leader is the one that we prefer the most out of all of the options out there. It works the best. And so I use that because it has a really nice calming effect on her, and I could take her into a busier environment. She was calmer, and I'd use very little corrections or adjustments. I could basically give her only, positive reinforcement. I didn't have to be, being upset with her for making poor choices, because the poor choices didn't really come.
Right.
Because I was sort of setting her up to be successful by, gauging my distance with distractions and having equipment that was helpful and easy for me to control her on. I had really, really high value treats. I just tried to sort of set the situation up so that it would go to my favor and to hers.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Now, Dan and Ellen Luton ask, doubling back to catching the bad behavior before it happens, in their case it's jumping up, is it safe to assume the puppy can recognize this correction before making the poor decision, or do they need 1 second? This is a really good question, and it doesn't surprise me it's coming from one of our students, because we talk about
the 1 second time frame.
Yeah, you have 1 second between the point when your dog does something good and when you mark that and reward them for it, for them to really understand that that's the thing that you like. But in the case where it comes to jumping up, you need to have timing that's appropriate to interrupt the behavior. So you need to mark that moment that even if your dog's thinking about it, like, a dog jumping up onto the counter, for example, you'll see them start to air scent, and they'll just start sniffing.
Or coil to be about to jump.
Or just standing still and being like, oh, I'm thinking about something. If you can interrupt them at that moment, it doesn't need to be 1 second.
Yeah, when your dog does that, that's the moment where we would say off and give them a warning. Don't jump. So the command off that we use, that's the word that we use. It doesn't mean get off of something. It means don't even jump in the first place.
Right.
So we would say off right away. And when you're first teaching this, we would say the word off, and then 1 second later, we would take our hand on the leash and we would prevent the puppy from being able to actually jump up on the counter or a person or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And then what happens is, through several repetitions of hearing the word off and then associating that with not being allowed to jump 1 second later, what will start to happen is the dog will be about to jump. You'll say off, and the dog will go, oh, maybe I'm not supposed to do that. And now that's your amazing moment to say, yay, you just listened so good.
Right.
And then reward them, maybe go give them something that they might want to play with instead, but acknowledge the fact that you asked them not to make the poor choice and they responded. That's so good. But unfortunately, what most people do is they just end up saying off, 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 and they never actually physically stop the dog for jumping. And the dog says that off command, you just say it over and over again, but it means nothing. So apply the leash prevention to the word the first several times that you use it, and then you'll see that it just magic. It just starts working.
Mm-hmm. Sometimes when we're down here doing the train station, I feel like Pinky, and then we've got the brain over here, and she gives all these great articulate answers, and what we're going to do today, Blaine. And there's you can see her brain actually coming out of the poof at the back here. Tons of good info, tons of great questions from all of our subscribers and viewers today. We want to thank you guys for joining us. We need to head over to the agility arena and start getting ready for the big weekend. There's a big weekend of dog agility ahead.
Yes.
At the McCann Dogs Agility Training Facility, and I am pumped to get over there, start seeing some of the people that are arriving early. I'm excited about it, but I want to thank you for joining us. Now, we try to do a new train station episode every single week. So if this is your first time on the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so that we can help you to have a well-behaved four-legged family member. I love the fact that you guys were here the entire training session. I love the fact we were able to raise some money for Dogs for Diabetics. I want to thank you guys for joining us. And